We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. And today we're talking security, financial, food, and national. It's going to be quite the show. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. One of the most significant factors impacting American security these days is that of the food situation. How is it going? Why does it seem that most foods are being classified as poisonous to some degree? We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on this topic. And we're very fortunate to be joined by farmer, lawyer, statesman, some might say, national correspondent of LibertyNation.com, Mr. John Clark. How are you, sir?
I'm very well and blessed to be here. Thanks for having me, Mark.
So, John, food safety and food security and even food usefulness is really coming to the fore. Part of this is due to Robert F. Kennedy's pushing of Make America Healthy Again. That's very much the zeitgeist of it. But the concerns over food security and food safety have been growing for quite a while. Why do you think they're coming to a head right now?
Well, I think several changes in our food system are coming to a head, and particularly here in the U.S. There are a lot of things that we eat that are not permitted in your foods in Europe and other parts of the world. But the biggest transition for all of human agriculture has been GMO technology and the monocultures that now supply the bulk of our food and our livestock's feed. They are dependent on glyphosate and other chemical applications, and more evidence is coming out that maybe this is not good for the soil, not good for human health, and there's a reason why something like 98% of American women have glyphosate or Roundup in their breast milk. Maybe it's not good and should be studied more. And so there's a huge controversy about glyphosate itself. There have been thousands of lawsuits claiming that it causes Hodgkin's lymphoma, but it's only one of many chemicals, and I think more Americans are becoming aware that their food is saturated with unnatural, human-made chemicals, often designed to also then in processing, also designed to stimulate our taste buds or to cover up bad flavors or to make us keep
or
eating
no flavors,
what we don't want to.
in fact.
Or yeah, I mean, and right. And so actually there's a whole book by a guy named Michael Moss called Hooked, which is really creepy. It's like a Frankenstein book. They're out there right now trying to create more chemicals to make us eat stuff. But another big thing, in answer to your question, is recent revelations about two things. One is all of the chemicals also in our packaging. We've been told for 100 years that those Teflon frying pans were just fine. And now we've identified over 12,000 chemicals that are forever chemicals that build up in our bodies and that are in our packaging. Everything from saran wrap to the snackables to every dimension of our food. So now we have an extra source of contamination. And in the midst of that, we have this sort of, wow, I could have had a V8 realization that so much human illness is linked to the human gut. And guess what? All of these chemicals kill the microbiome of the human gut. And here we are. And so I think the convergence of all three of those things is actually creating a very real crisis. It's actually a dawning awareness that, whoops, we've made some mistakes in pursuit of cheap, fast food. And how do we slow it down and heal ourselves from this sort of self-immolation? I think that's why you're going to continue to see the zeitgeist shift.
So that's a fascinating little recent history thing that you've covered there, John. And it seems to me that for the entirety of human history, there's been almost a natural flourishing of people with their food environments, and it's been a very symbiotic relationship. So people have used the land for farming or for hunter-gathering, depending on where they are. And it's been, by necessity, it's been a beneficial relationship to each side, because if one side goes astray, usually the human side, then that area of food production or health-giving production dissipates or gets destroyed. And yet, I guess since food stopped being what we might term food, that there's a lot more processing involved to make food or food-related substances. What's happened is that's actually been detrimental to the the environmental factors that allow food conversion products like grass, for example, proper grasses to feed cows, to be ruined or deteriorated. And I'm wondering, is this, and without getting too apocalyptic, it seems to me that the type of farming now that the more environmental people talk about, the people who are very focused on the environmental stuff, even those on the far fringes, um, they seem to be quite destructive to the land. Whereas if we got back to, and I know you're a big proponent of this, like regenerative farming, we wouldn't actually be at the tipping point where we are now. Have I made any sense there?
You've made a lot of sense, and you liked my last comment, and I made it up in response to your question. If you ask the right questions, you make my cogs come together, and you've done it again. So let me see if I can address that. Yes, ultimately, I don't make the rules. We don't make the rules. The Green Revolution and the modern ability to grow a lot of food in a small space really is a form of miracle. The problem is, like many things with technologies, we found out it had long-term impacts that ultimately may lead to desertification, the destruction of soil. And this, through that agricultural history, is what many ancient cultures have done. They have destroyed their soils by not stewarding them well. We are not new to that game. What we are new to, and to use your launching point, is that humans for tens of thousands of years employed horses and cows, or oxen mostly, and ourselves as labor in agriculture, human labor. We might have had a grist mill with a little hydro here and there, but mostly it was human labor. And then all of a sudden the combustion engine comes along, and there's a long history of fertilizers, everything from human fertilizer, which was prized in China,
Like soil. Yeah.
yes, literally you would, when visiting friends, you would deposit something for them at the end of the night, so that they could, Gene Lodgson has written a book about
A
this.
tradition I'm sure many of us carry on to this day.
Well, actually, I know people who do. It's called composting, and it's legal, and and because it works, because the bacteria actually get killed by that bacterial action. But so then we had a whole guano industry, which led to wars and seizures of properties, and then that kind of failed, and we've got this synthetic fertilizer. So in a very short period of time, historically, humans went from cow, horse, and our backs to fossil fuels, which provide enormous amounts of energy, but they're limited in supply, and they are directly linked to a fiat currency. See, it used to be I could sell you some milk and trade you for a little chunk of gold I could bite on, and we have something called a fiat currency. So we've now intruded between ourselves and our food a dependency on fossil fuels, many of them from abroad, and that are then denominated in a dollar, which is susceptible to inflation. And then we have all the other technological dependencies in addition to the energy. And what you're talking about is an effort at the industrial scale to shift towards what are called regenerative practices, no-till agriculture. I think that's what you're referring to. And many of these processes are highly productive, but highly destructive. And so they require more and more applications of chemicals every year to get your same yield. More atrazine, which is an endocrine disruptor and mimics estrogen, maybe not good in our bodies. I'm pretty sure it's banned in Europe, is still in use in America because it increases our corn crop by about 4% a year. How much are we going to put profits above human health? We have about 92 million acres put to corn last year. The ethanol market, it's all a boondoggle. It's all polluting more than it's protecting. It's not ultimately actually efficient enough to spare us energy. We have bad policies created by corporations that are very profitable for them, very unhealthy for the rest of us. Hydrogenated fat, high fructose corn syrup. These are waste products that they've found a way to process into something that we're supposed to feed our children. And you may have been watching the litigation and efforts to improve legislation in America so that we don't have heavy metals like cadmium and lead and mercury in our baby food, in our beech nut baby food. So can we really trust our food companies any more than tobacco companies, which once upon a time lied to us? So a lot of this effort that I think you referred to by industrial food producers is to try to put on a patina or a facade of regenerativeness. But if you're reducing the amount of times you till, but you're still soaking the ground with chemicals in order to get your yield, you've only come part of the way. And these chemicals kill the microbes in the soil, increase erosion, increase water loss, the whole thing. is actually a slow motion catastrophe unfolding before our eyes. And industrial agriculture has a long way to go before it can do more good than harm in its production.
If only there were a four-legged, four-stomached solution to this whole problem. We'll be back with John Clark after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.